Now in our 25th year, a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are this week in Amateur Radio. Your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition, number 1329, with a release and air date of Saturday, August 17, 2024. Please take the program to your air, following the upcoming cue tone.
Heard around the world on the ham bands, and across the planet streaming on the internet, we are this week in Amateur Radio. The worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1329 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The ARRL strongly urges protecting the amateur radio 902 through 928 MHz band. Solar Cycle 25 is producing record-high sunspot numbers. The High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program in Alaska is conducting research during this week and next week, and is looking for assistance from the amateur community. Amateur radio is providing communications as Hurricane Ernesto travels north. On the shortwaves, Radio New Zealand Pacific activates new transmitters. The Radio Amateurs of Canada offices is reporting phishing attempts. NASA seeks student-built missions to send to space in 2026 and beyond. A New York City high school has licensed a large segment of its student population. The ARRL Hudson Division is appointed a new vice director. And, long-wave broadcasts are about to begin from the Arctic Circle. We will tell you who is putting it on the air, and the frequency, in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will tell us about internet access across the high-frequency bands. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us aboard the Wayback Machine to the year 1915 to witness how the amateurs of the era proposed offering communications in times of emergencies to the government, in a segment entitled, A Patriotic and Dignified Effort. We will stop by and visit with Bill Saliers, AJ8B, in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, Radiosport, upcoming contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air, right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio just outside of Albany, New York, where we have milky skies due to the smoke in the atmosphere, this is W2XBS.
And reporting from my ham shack this week in Cortlandville, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
Reporting from Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
And reporting from our Trey, New York news bureau, where the goldenrod is in its prime, I'm Eric, KD2RJX.
And reporting from our news bureau here in Western Mass, where the air is filled with the sound of backpacks unzipping and the cries of parents crying trying to remember algebra, I'm Marvin Turner, W0MET.
And recording from our news basement here in Scotia, New York, I'm Savo, K2SAV.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I'm about to head south to the Huntsville Hamfest, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
And reporting from our Catskill Mountains radio outpost in upstate New York, where the corn is as high as an elephant's eye, and we are cornier than Kansas in August, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where the mercury in the thermometer is coursing ever upward, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
And now, with this week's lead story, here's our own Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
Taking the top spot in the news this week, the Federal Communications Commission accepted for public comment a petition for rulemaking filed by NextNav Incorporated, a licensee in the 900 megahertz location and monitoring service, or LMS, to completely reconfigure the 902 through 928 megahertz band and replace the LMS with high-powered 5G cellular and related location services. The FCC notice requested comment on the effects that NextNav's proposals would have on amateur radio operations in the band. The FCC notice requested comment on the effects that NextNav's proposals would have on amateur radio operations in the band, the ARRL said. The National Association for Amateur Radio is preparing comments urging protection of existing and future amateur uses in this band and urges all amateurs to file their own comments describing their activities in this band and the expected effect of the proposed changes. NextNav currently holds licenses in the 900 MHz band that authorizes it to provide services limited to determining the location and status of mobile radio units. NextNav ties its request to provide high-power broadband, cellular, and location services to the vulnerabilities of the current satellite-based GPS system and urges that implementation of its proposal would complement GPS by providing an alternative nationwide terrestrial location system in addition to cellular and broadband services. Under its proposal, NextNav would be designated the sole nationwide licensee for this spectrum in exchange for its more limited licenses. The new nationwide license would authorize NextNav to provide much higher-powered traditional broadband and 5G cellular services, as well as the related location service occupying 15 of the total 26 MHz available in the band. The reconfiguration proposed by NextNav would create a 5 MHz wide uplink subband at 902 to 907 MHz, paired with a 10 MHz downlink subband at 918 to 928 MHz. The 5 MHz uplink subband would be limited to use by mobiles with a maximum of 3 watts ERP. On the 10 MHz downlink subband, up to 2,000 watts ERP would be permitted in rural areas and 1,000 watts ERP in urban and suburban areas, radiating from tower structures that could reach 1,000 feet or more feet above average terrain. These configurations reflect the FCC's rules for standard cellular configurations that have been adopted to govern a number of other bands used for similar 5G and like services. Although uses by the amateur radio service in the band are secondary to LMS, NextNav is proposing substantial technical and use changes that would completely alter the foundation upon which the current rules and spectrum sharing arrangements rely, and undercut shared use of the band by amateurs as well as a variety of other users. In addition, NextNav proposes deletion of a specific interference provision in the Commission's rules that was adopted to encourage and protect continued sharing with amateurs and other secondary users. NextNav, in this petition, argues, without evidence, that the changes that it proposes to the 902 to 928 MHz band will not impede amateur radio operations. In an 8-page description of NextNav's proposal released by the FCC's Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, the FCC staff asked a series of questions that would clarify the proposal and help the Commission ascertain the likely effects of the proposed changes on existing users if the requested changes were adopted. Comment was specifically requested on the extent of amateur operations in the band, the potential impact of the proposed changes, any other spectrum options that may exist, and the cost for relocations if other options exist. ARRL is preparing comments urging protection for existing and future amateur uses in this band. ARRL urges all amateurs to study the proposal and file their own comments describing their activities in this band and the expected effect of the proposed changes. The filing deadline is September 5th, 2024. Replies to comments are due by September 20th, 2024. You can find details on how to file comments with the Commission on the League's website.
Record high solar cycle 25 solar maximum sunspot numbers have improved HF propagation since mid-July and possibly bringing worldwide 6-meter F2 propagation this fall. Here with the details is John Ross, KD8IDJ, reporting from League headquarters.
According to the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center, solar cycle 25 likely reached its highest sunspot number yet, as of 299 on August 8th. The World Data Center Sunspot Index and Long-Term Solar Observations publishes near real-time estimated international sunspot numbers EISN, and they based those on global networks of reporting stations. EISN reports during solar cycle 25 were consistently well below 200 until suddenly rising to 218 on July 14th and reaching 289 on July 18th, but then declining to 178 on July 22nd. Since February 2002, worldwide 6-meter propagation has been mostly limited to sporadic occurrences of transequatorial propagation, known as TEP, near the equinox months, and the occasional sporadic E propagation reaching many thousands of miles during June and July. Worldwide 6-meter F2 propagation may occur again, perhaps very frequently, starting in late October of 2024, if daily EISN reports consistently remain well above 200. For more detailed information and access to all of the links, visit arrl.org. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
While occasional brief daily EISN increases are not unusual during solar maximum, after only 5 days, the daily EISN suddenly rose to 212 on July 27th, reaching a solar cycle 25 record high 297 on August 8th, and remaining mostly well above 200 through this writing on August 11th. Daily EISN reports are likely to remain well above 200 during most days through late September and possibly much longer.
Now celebrating our 25th year keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at twiar.net.
The High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, or HAARP, will be conducting a research campaign beginning August 13th through the 16th and continuing on August 18th through the 20th, 2024. The experiments support work by the Polar Aeronomy. Operating frequencies will vary, but all HAARP transmissions will be between 2.8 MHz and 10 MHz. Actual transmit days and times are highly variable based on real-time ionospheric and/or geomagnetic conditions. Amateur radio operators are invited to listen and send reception reports to uaf-gi-harp at alaska.edu or to HARP, P.O. Box 271, Gakona, Alaska 99586. This campaign is being conducted in support of research proposals from the Polar Aeronomy and Radio Science Summer School, with over 25 unique experiments taking place. The theme of this year's program is Illuminating Space. The scientific goals of these experiments range from studies on the effects of ionospheric conditions on GPS satellite signals to the generation and propagation of extremely low frequency and very low frequency waves. More information on the Polar Aeronomy and Radio Science Summer School can be found at the following web address: harp.gi.alaska.edu/PARS2024.
As of 11 in the morning on Wednesday, August 14, 2024, the National Hurricane Center reported that Tropical Storm Ernesto had become a Category 1 hurricane. A hurricane warning has now been issued for Bermuda, and dangerous rip currents are likely along the U.S. East Coast beaches this weekend, August 17 and the 18th. Bobby Graves, KB5HAV, Hurricane Watch Net Manager, reports the net's activation plans on Saturday, August 17. 20 meters will resume operations on 14.325 megahertz at 7 a.m. in the morning, or 1100 UTC. 40 meters will resume operations on 7.268 megahertz at 8:30 in the morning, or 12:30 UTC. VoIP Hurricane Net is not active yet, but is monitoring the situation. As coming to air, the hurricane is currently about 605 miles south-southwest of Bermuda, with sustained winds of 85 miles an hour, moving north at 13 miles per hour. Hurricane force winds extend outward up to 45 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds extend outward up to 175 miles. The forecast track shows the center of Ernesto expected to pass over or near Bermuda on Saturday, August 17. Ernesto has now moved out of the Puerto Rican area. The island suffered flash flooding, storm damage, and widespread power outages on Wednesday as Ernesto moved by. Half of all residents were without power, with flooding and damage especially pronounced in the eastern part. The information coordinator for the area, Luis Santana Diaz, WP3GW, reports that amateur radio operators are there on the KP4 FRA repeater system, reporting situations in different municipalities. Fred Claybear, K9VV/NNA2FK, section manager of the ARRL Virgin Islands section, reports Virgin Islands Territorial Management Emergency System has been activated. On Tuesday night, the power was out for all customers on the islands with lines down, trees blocking some roads. Claybear estimated that the full power restoration may take 1 to 2 days. All U.S. Virgin Island repeaters are operating except for one, and the British Virgin Islands BVI .73 repeater is on the air as well. The Starlink antenna, in use for the first time, survived 75 to 80 mile-an-hour winds, and gusts with service solid at 150-plus megabyte download speed, even through the clouds.
David Galletley, KM20, has been appointed Vice Director of the ARRL Hudson Division. ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, appointed Galletley to the remainder of the term ending in December 2024, following the promotion of former Vice Director Ed Wilson, N2XDD, to Hudson Division Director. Galletley has been active in amateur radio since 1998. An ARRL Life member, he is a member and past president of the Albany Amateur Radio Association, treasurer of the Hudson Valley Contesters and DXers, and president of the Albany County ACES Radio Club. He served for over a dozen years as section emergency coordinator of the ARRL Eastern New York section. His interests include contesting, chasing DX, ARRL Field Day, award chasing, activating POTA, instructing license classes, assisting in VE sessions, and staying active in emergency communications and public service activities. Galletley is retired Senior Vice President of WAMC Northeast Public Radio, a regional network of stations where he had a 35-year career. He was responsible for operations, programming, and finance of the NPR member stations. He earned a BA in Communications and MS in Education from the University at Albany, as well as a Certificate in Management Development for Public Broadcasting Executives from the Wharton School of Business and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Upon retirement, WAMC's newsroom was named in his honor. Galletley was the station's first news director. The ARRL Hudson Division is comprised of the ARRL sections of Eastern New York, New York City, Long Island, and Northern New Jersey.
Beginning on Friday, September 6, 2024, Maxim Memorial Station W1AW will begin using a new 17-meter frequency for its scheduled CW transmissions due to increased activity near the current bulletin frequency. In order to reduce the possibility of interference, W1AW will move to 18077.5 kHz.
Plans are shaping up for the 2024 Northeast Ham Exposition and New England Division Convention on August 22nd through the 25th, 2024 in Marlborough, Massachusetts. This year's convention will be held at the Best Western Royal Plaza Hotel and Trade Center, 181 Boston Post Road West, Marlborough, Massachusetts, 01752. This venue is located off of I-495 on Route 20 West. It offers many amenities and lots of nearby family-friendly attractions and dining options. The festivities kick off on Thursday evening, August 22nd, with entertainment provided by nationally known comedian Justin McKinney. Seating is limited to 250 people. Tickets are just $35 and also available as part of the Convention Plus package. Join your fellow hams for a delicious DXCC and contest banquet on Friday night with Yuri Onipko, VE3DZ, as he recaps his 50 years of DX and contesting activities and shares his operating experiences from a variety of locations around the world. Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, will present the keynote on Saturday morning. Steve leads ARRL's Education and Learning Department. He has a passion for youth outreach and works constantly to find ways to engage more youth in wireless technology and help teachers elevate their STEM programs. The Saturday evening grand banquet will feature special guest Dr. Tamitha Scove, WX6SWW. Known as Space Weather Woman in social media, Dr. Scove forecasts and analyzes space weather processes in the heliosphere and exosphere. Several new vendors will have their wares on display at the convention this year: Flex Radio, Elecraft, and Step IR Communications Systems. We'll also feature Halibut Electronics, Club Gear Online, Reliance Antennas, Remote Ham Radio, VE2DX Electronics, Gold Medal Ideas, AG Custom Gifts, and others. New for 2024 is Mini Contest University, based on K3LR's popular Contest University. CTU has been featured at the Dayton Hamvention since 2007 and has been presented in 15 countries to over 10,000 participants. Mini CTU is a series of contest-oriented talks and presentations offered at Ham Exposition all day Friday. Ham Exposition is pleased to offer a Parks on the Air track featuring presentations designed for both the newcomer and experienced POTA operators alike. There will be a functioning portable station operating on the hotel grounds designed to show beginners how to chase POTA contacts. In addition, an actual POTA activation will occur in a nearby state park following the prize drawing and closing ceremony. This year, volunteers will staff a special Get on the Air station, W1XPO, to mentor and assist newcomers in making their first HF contact. Our popular MCOM track will be back for 2024. Veteran emergency communicators will share their knowledge and experience to help others to up their game. In addition to talks and presentations, convention goers will get to see operational emergency communications vehicles on display in the parking lot. As always, the Northeast Ham Exposition will feature a robust flea market open to tailgaters on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. No major convention would be worth its salt without great prizes. Along with hourly drawings, we're pleased to announce that one lucky person will receive the grand prize, an ICOM IC705 QRP all-in-one transceiver. Second prize will be a Xiegu X6100 QRP HF 6-meter transceiver. The third prize will be an ICOM ID50A VHF UHF D-Star handheld. Tickets can be purchased in advance by visiting ticketing.hamexposition.org. That's ticketing.hamexposition.org.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Radio amateurs in India are facing a deadline of August 24th to submit feedback on new amateur radio rules being proposed by the Ministry of Communications Department of Telecommunications. The changes relate specifically to the Amateur Station Operator's Certificate. A certificate would become mandatory for anyone who wishes to operate or even install ham radio equipment and would be assigned under two categories, restricted and general, defined by operating privileges. The government is also proposing the elimination of a separate authorization for the import of ham radio equipment. Finally, candidates for the certificate will be required to apply to sit for the exam at least 1 month before it is given. The government released a draft of these and related changes, publishing them in the Gazette in July. Feedback and suggestions should be sent directly to the Joint Secretary of the Department of Telecommunications in New Delhi.
While some international broadcasters are switching off their shortwave transmitters, Radio New Zealand Pacific is investing in the medium. On August 1st, the broadcaster put online a brand new 100-kilowatt shortwave transmitter. The new transmitter replaces a 33-year-old Radio New Zealand Pacific transmitter installed in 1989 near Taupo in central North Island. Part of a $4.4 million project to improve Radio New Zealand Pacific's capabilities, the new transmitter supports both DRM digital and analog operation. The switch-on was observed by New Zealand's Foreign Affairs Minister Winston Peters and dignitaries from Kiribati, the Cook Islands, Samoa, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and Solomon Islands from RNZ House in Wellington, while another RNZ delegation was at the Rangitaki transmitter site. Shortwave was very important back when the New Zealand Broadcasting Service launched in 1948, but it's still seriously important now, said the minister. He went on to say shortwave is the most certain system there is to make sure that in a crisis, tsunami, or cyclone, we can get through. There are 22 broadcast partners throughout the region using RNZ's DRM digital streams by rebroadcasting them locally without compromising audio quality. Following Australia's shutdown of its shortwave transmitters in 2017, New Zealand and China have become the only two providing the region with shortwave services.
The Radio Amateurs of Canada is reporting that there have been several recent attempts from RAC members of phishing attempts by someone purporting to be from Radio Amateurs of Canada, or who is forwarding a message on their behalf. Phishing attacks come from scammers disguised as trustworthy sources and can facilitate access to all types of sensitive data. As technologies evolve, so do cyber attacks. Phishing attempts use publicly available information to fake legitimacy. In some cases, they use the names and contact information of RAC officials to gain your trust. For example, a recent phishing attempt used the fake heading Minutes and Announcements August 2, 2024, and states, "You have received a secure message from Phil A. McBride from Radio Amateurs of Canada." It then instructs recipients to save and open an attachment and then sign in using their own email address. In these cases, please do not follow the instructions.
Andrew Maluzzi, Ph.D., KK4LWR, has been appointed Vice Director of the ARRL Southeastern Division. ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, appointed Maluzzi to the remainder of the term ending in December 2025, following the recent death of former Vice Director Jeff Beals, WA4AW. Maluzzi works for Walt Disney Imagineering as a Senior Ride Control Systems Engineer. He earned his Ph.D. at the University of Florida in Electrical and Computer Engineering, focusing on high-performance computing. Maluzzi has been active in amateur radio since 2012. He remains active in his collegiate club as a board member for the Alumni and Friends of Gator Amateur Radio. Maluzzi volunteers with Youth on the Air and is a co-advisor for the ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio program, along with his brother Tony Maluzzi, KD8RTT. They have supported the program since 2017, extensively networking college amateur radio clubs and students. Maluzzi has served on the ARRL Public Relations Committee since 2018. He is an ARRL Life member. The ARRL Southeastern Division includes Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Charging that he ignored an FCC enforcement action late last year, the FCC has amplified its sanctions against a Bronx broadcaster, imposing a penalty of $2.3 million. According to trade publications, the commission says that Johnny Peralta had been operating an unauthorized FM radio station in the Bronx for 6 or more years. According to the Radio World website and local media, his broadcasts as La Mia Radio on 105.7 were designated to serve New York City's Dominican audience. Having received no response from its previous enforcement action, the FCC issued a forfeiture order confirming the $2.3 million fine. That fine was proposed last November in a notice of apparent liability by the Commission. The notice followed the FCC's documentation of antenna installations through photographs and numerous field strength measurements taken by field agents. The Commission says the broadcaster did not respond to earlier notice. Enactment of the Pirate Act 4 years ago gave the FCC greater powers of enforcement against unlicensed broadcasting radios and the ability to impose a higher fine. The Commission does not collect the fines, however. That's the responsibility of the U.S. Department of Justice, which it intends to contact within 30 days if Peralta does not respond to the latest action. According to Radio World, the FCC is confident that this is one case that might draw more immediate attention from justice officials because of the amount of the fine. It's the highest allowable amount under the 4-year-old federal law. On January 24th of 2020, the Preventing Illegal Radio Abuse Through Enforcement Act, or Pirate Act, became law and was codified in the Section 511 of the Communications Act. The Pirate Act gives the FCC additional enforcement authority, including higher penalties against pirate stations and any person who permits the operation of pirate radio, up to $100,000 per day of violation, up to a maximum of $2 million.
On August 1st, 2024, Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, ARRL Education and Learning Manager, took a train trip to New York City to visit the Staten Island Technical High School. To tell us how the high school licensed a large amount of its students at a VE session, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, with this report.
He was there to help administer amateur radio exams to 49 students, and all of those students passed their exams. Several upgraded their licenses from general to extra class, and 2 students went from unlicensed to extra class, all in one sitting. Their teacher, Everton Enriquez, KD2ZZT, attended the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology, TI1, last year, and TI2 this year. Since then, Enriquez has helped over 100 kids successfully test for their amateur radio licenses. He has built a program incorporating HF, local repeater use, fox hunting, and space communications, and has plans to incorporate mesh networking with his students this coming school year. On August 6, 2024, Enriquez was helping his students build antennas to help make contact with the International Space Station. They made a 5-element VHF bad boy antenna with a mounting mechanism to rotate and pitch the heading using 3D printed materials, PVC, and aluminum rods. They tried using an IC2730A VHF-UHF radio on medium power, but while that didn't go as well as planned, they were able to hear a lot of activity on 70 centimeters. Staten Island Technical High School began as a New York City public high school in 1988. Its student body is comprised of lifelong learners, innovation facilitators, contributions to the betterment of society, and intellectually inquisitive young men and women. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
In September of 2005, the school was granted the status as New York City's 7th specialized high school by the New York City Department of Education. New York City's specialized high schools are composed of the most academically gifted and talented students.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Coming up next, This Week in Amateur Radio is presenting another chapter of A Century of Amateur Radio, hams, organizations, events, inventions, from the mind of Chris Cordella, W2PA, and his editing team. Each episode will bring a different aspect of early amateur radio history. Coming up here on This Week in Amateur Radio.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. I have an email from Janet, W8CAA. She writes, quote, "Last week during the DX Mentor podcast, you mentioned a program for improving your CW speed called Rough ZXP. Can you tell me about this program?" Well, yeah, Janet, I sure can. Rough ZXP is the abbreviation of the German word Rufscheinhorn, which means call sign hearing. RUFZXP is an excellent training application for improving code speed and CW practice, particularly ultra-high-speed memory copying of true amateur radio calls. Focusing on the improvement of CW proficiency, it is not a contest simulator and does not provide for QRM. It provides additional tools for keeping track of training progress and comparing with other operators via an international top list. Rough ZXP is a must for every serious high-speed telegraphy operator and is the official competition of the ARU High-Speed Telegraphy Championship program. How does it work? Rough ZXP is pretty simple. You do not need a manual for the basic functions. It sends a chosen number of random, selected true amateur radio call signs, 50 by default, to be keyed in with the keyboard into a field on the screen. After the Enter key is pressed, the computer gives its next call. If the previous call was copied correctly, the transmitting speed increases slightly. If not, it decreases slightly. So the software automatically adapts its transmitting speed to the user's maximum performance. The previous call is repeated by pressing the F6 key, but you will sustain a 50% penalty in time. The number of points for each call is primarily related to the CW speed sent, the number of errors, and the length of the call. Typing time is of minor influence. At the end of each run, the software gives you a precise score. This enables you to track your performance. And with a little practice, you will see good progress very soon. You may compete with others around the globe. Simply use the integrated function to post your encrypted scores to the Rough ZXP International Top List. There are already more than 2,000 participants with their scores. The current champion is Stanislaw Hirlenka, EW8GS, who broke the 300,000 point limit. He has reached a maximum speed of 195 words per minute. Congratulations on that outstanding achievement. That's nuts. Give this a try and let me know how you do. I hope that answers your question, Janet. Thanks for the email. And if you have a question in mind or you'd like clarification, you can shoot me an email at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Often people will ask me if there is a written copy of the information that I present. There are so many call signs, dates, and URLs being discussed, you could never remember them until such time as you could write them down. I use most of the same information that you hear in the DX Corner for the weekly DX column in the Ohio Section Journal. If you just Google Ohio Section or ARRL Ohio Section, you will find the Ohio Section website, and from there you can sign up for the weekly journal, and you'll get most of this information. The actual website is arl-ohio.org. It's a free journal, and you don't need to be an ARL member to receive it. You won't get the well-rounded information that you get from the This Week in Amateur Radio podcast, but you will get my DX information and a little bit more. So here's what's happening in the world of DX. This section of DX News comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. So here's an update from Jarvis Island. N5J has completed 6 days of operating. The log shows over 63,000 QSOs despite some really terrible conditions. Are you still having trouble working the SuperFox? Many hounds are still chasing us on SuperFox using Release Candidate 5. PSK Reporter shows which versions are chasing us. We looked today at the spots. Of the 7,500 reports, 1,500 were still using Release Candidate 5. They are not in the log. Please update your software. Poor conditions also chop up the Fox signal. We will operate some foxhound, some regular foxhound, on one of the 2 FT8 stations this coming weekend. This is the first time that Jarvis Island has been on the air in 34 years. As such, it is number 17 on the Club Log DXCC Most Wanted list. Don, N1DG, has posted a video with an aerial view of the station and antennas. According to Wikipedia, Jarvis Island is, quote, an uninhabited coral reef located in the South Pacific Ocean, about halfway between Hawaii and the Cook Islands. It is an unincorporated, unorganized territory of the United States, administered by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service of the U.S. Department of the Interior, as part of the National Wildlife Refuge System, end quote. The exceptionally detailed N5J website lists local, remote CW, and remote FT8 SuperFox operators, as well as sponsors. After extensive testing at K8R in late July and early August, all FT8 stations are using SuperFox mode. There is also a detailed, graphics-rich description of the radio in a box, ribs, and a link at which to search the log. The website includes propagation information from k6tu.net. Clublog also has a propagation wizard, and this comes from the N5J team. Now, I've been able to work them 3 times, although I haven't had a lot of time, but Joe, W-A-G-E-X, has them at least 16 different modes and band slots. Well done. From the C21MM team headed to Nauru, we have this update. As a reminder, our C21MM homepage has been online since July 28, 2024. In between, we all got our visas from Nauru and Australia. On our way from Germany to Nauru, there is an overnight stay in Brisbane. Today, we would like to give you some insights on our logo. If you try to find something typical for Nauru, you always come across phosphate mining, which is a story about colonialism and how fast wealth can fade away quickly. This is what the excavator stands for. However, there is still beautiful nature on the island, like the endemic bird, the Nauru reed warbler, which can be seen on the left side of the logo. We have to admit it's a slightly beautified version of it, I'll have to say. The original can be seen on one of the stamps of the small island. To make the logo complete, we had to add the famous 5-band LZ beam antenna, and of course, that's a must. Thanks to Vincent, F4CVQ, for the artwork of the logo, and Fred, DH5 Fox Sierra, for the idea. K1MMB, Jeff, is back in Mali, and once again QRV as Tango Zulu 4 Alpha Mike. He'll be concentrating on NA and JA when the bands are open in that direction. Thursday, he was on 17 meter CW around 18068 from 1950 to 1940 Zulu. Jeff notes that there have been, quote, fewer power cuts, and his 6-meter beacon continues to be on 50.006.2 kilohertz. Jeff will be there till the end of the month, so if you can catch him, you got about 2 weeks. The 6 Oscar 3 Tango Somaliland DXpedition team is scheduled to be QRV in September. Some websites are reporting the dates as September 9th to the 30th, but team leader IV3JPP Fabry says that these dates are not precise, end quote. As widely reported in the media, Somalia, and especially Mogadishu, its capital, is a dangerous place. The team will be in a safe, northwestern location. They could be there earlier or later than the dates being teased around on the internet. Likewise, their ending date is also adaptable. The 6 Oscar 3 Tango operators have, quote, air tickets with flexible dates and are in contact with local authorities who will have to ensure the team's safety, end quote. Stay tuned to W3UR or to me to get an update. Ain't this solar maximum great? Solar Cycle 25 is now much stronger than anyone anticipated, and it's slowly growing stronger through at least this weekend. Today's estimated international sunspot number is 281. It's increasingly likely that we'll have widespread coast-to-coast and worldwide 6-meter F2 propagation during about half the days between late October and at least early February. Widespread F2 openings are likely to bring 6-meter CW and sideband to life like we haven't experienced in more than 20 years. The first sign of enhanced 6-meter F2 will be increasingly frequent TEP from Europe and North America to South America and the South Atlantic islands. TEP may begin very sporadically by late August and become increasingly frequent later in September and especially during October. Coast-to-coast F2 propagation and propagation crossing the Atlantic to Europe and Africa may begin sporadically during September and October and become frequent and long-lasting by early November. Effective 6-meter antennas can be small. A 3-element Yagi is a small, lightweight, and very effective antenna. A 20-foot antenna height is adequate, but sloping terrain or higher antennas perform much better. However, heights higher than 50 feet are unnecessary and, in many cases, perform poorly. Are you ready for this once-in-a-lifetime experience? 7.3s from Frank, W3LPL. And I'm excited about that, and we thank Frank for that information. If you are someone who likes podcasts and or YouTube episodes, the DX Mentor has part 2 of the Enhancing Your DX Experience podcast with well-known DXer Ralph, K9ZO. And I've gotten a lot of excellent feedback on this particular podcast. Check it out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So now we have a contest update. I know that the ARRL contest sheet is read elsewhere in this podcast, and the contests that I mention are sometimes redundant. However, There are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or to get entities or zones in the log that may be otherwise difficult to get. Personally, I try to participate in as many contests as I can during the year. I consider the contest season to run from the fourth Saturday in August to Memorial Day weekend of the next year. The significance of August to May is that the Ohio CUSO Party is held on the fourth weekend in August, and the CQ Worldwide WPX-CW contest is held during the last weekend in May. Although I do participate in as many state CUSO parties and other contests as I can, my focus starts with the Ohio CUSO Party. The majority of the information presented here is from the Ohio CUSO Party website and is used here courtesy of the Mad River Radio Club. Why the Ohio CUSO Party? The objective of this contest is for amateurs inside the state of Ohio to contact as many amateurs as possible, both inside and outside of Ohio. For amateurs outside the state of Ohio to contact as many Ohio stations as possible. Non-Ohio stations may work only Ohio stations, while Ohio stations can contact anyone. The Ohio CUSO Party is an opportunity for amateur radio operators around the world to celebrate the great state of Ohio. Now, at the same time as the Ohio CUSO Party, the Kansas CUSO Party and the Hawaiian CUSO Party are running as well. And it's great to kind of hook up with some old friends on both of those. Well, what does this have to do with DX? Chasing DX requires operating skill, patience, and a solid knowledge of your equipment. Contests require all of this for an extended period. In the case of the Ohio CUSO Party, this is a 12-hour-long contest where one of the biggest factors is bits. Bits from KDV, Dave, is butt in the seat. In addition, it is really a lot of fun. So I'll be in it, and I hope if you get a chance, get on the air to work me, and I appreciate it. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to see you in the pile-ups.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Hello, and welcome to this, the sixth segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio, hams, organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. I want to thank Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his wonderful website in the preparation of these programs. So sit back and enjoy this, the next of many chapters of Ham Radio History. A patriotic and dignified effort. ARRL membership was free in 1915. QSD would be a new and separate entity. With a mixture of enthusiastic optimism and a strong belief in the necessity to organize hams across the country, Maxim and Tosca were confident enough of the magazine's future to risk some of their own money, mostly Maxim's, one would think, to get it rolling. The state of the world and the country at this point made such optimism a little difficult to muster. In fact, their first issue's lead article noted the serious national questions pertaining to defense and predicted that radio would likely play an important, though not yet fully understood, role. They were right. Signing as chairman, Maxim had written a letter that August to U.S. Navy Secretary Josephus Daniels in which he described the ARRL and the amateurs' accomplishments in relaying messages and aiding in emergencies. Maxim offered their services to the government, believing they would be valuable assets, especially since most of the members' stations were situated along both coasts. Writing with evident pride, he explained that although the league consisted of middle-aged men, young men, and boys, there were many amateur stations that were more capable than commercial ones. He also enclosed a current list of stations. In reply, Daniels welcomed his patriotic offer. He directed Maxim to correspond directly with the superintendent of the Naval Radio Service, who was in charge of radio operations, including how to use non-Navy facilities if necessary, and would be interested in as much detail as Maxim could supply. In particular, Foreshadowing regulatory disputes yet to come, he expressed interest in the method employed for the interior control of the amateur stations constituting the League. Daniels, whose assistant secretary at the time was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, believed that the Navy needed new technology, so he had created the Naval Consulting Board, appointing Thomas Edison as its chairman. Maxim had also written to the Secretary of War with a similar offer. A different kind of reply came back from Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Reber, acting Chief Signal Officer of the Signal Corps, formerly known as the U.S. Army Aviation Section, U.S. Signal Corps. Reber thanked him for the letter and, using very formal language, said in effect, "We'll call you when and if we need you." From the beginning, hams had a sense that with their operations and organization, they could and should contribute to the public good. Maxim summarized that the organization of our League in efficient working form is a work which is of national importance, and we may have the knowledge that it represents a patriotic and dignified effort. Judging by the letters that appeared in the second issue in January, the first issue had been received enthusiastically by the League's members. Jacob Weiss wrote the first letter to QST, calling its premiere issue a peach, and reported some on-air activity. Robert Campbell Jr. also wrote in to say that QST is all to the mustard, which I suppose meant good, since Mr. Campbell ordered a subscription and League license. Other letters talked of stations working each other, so that particular term was already in use. Included in this material are quotes from the following. National Defense, our services offered to government, December Radio Relay Bulletin, QST, December 1915, pages 3 to 5. Radio Communications by the Amateurs, QST, February 1916, pages 31 through 35. With gratitude to W2PA Chris Cordella for allowing us the use of his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Hams, Organizations, Events, Inventions, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
It is time for the weekly edition of AMSAT's satellite shorts from all over. We begin this week in England, where we find AMSAT UK announcing that the 2024 colloquium will take place alongside the Radio Society of Great Britain convention at Kents Hill Park Conference Centre, Milton Keynes, MK7 6BZ, on the weekend of October 13th and 14th, 2024. As in previous years, the AMSAT UK colloquium will run as a separate stream within the RSGB convention, and will include presentations on a variety of satellite and space-related topics. The annual general meeting of AMSAT UK will take place during the colloquium. Next up is congratulations are in order for Zeke Wheeler. KJ7NLL's desktop satellite tracker won first place in engineering and best of fair at the 2024 Oregon State Science Fair and Northwest Science Expo middle school level. Zeke presented an affordable, portable, orbital desktop satellite tracker at the 2024 Crowd Supply Teardown Conference. You can watch Zeke's presentation on YouTube. And finally this week comes news that a Chinese Long March 6A rocket broke apart in low Earth orbit and formed a debris field with hundreds of pieces, confirmed by U.S. Space Command. U.S. Spacecom has observed no immediate threats and continues to conduct routine conjunction assessments to support the safety and sustainability of the space domain, a U.S. Space Command spokesperson said. NASA Public Affairs Officer Rob Margetta said there was no immediate threat to the International Space Station. Satellite monitoring company Leo Labs estimated there were at least 700 fragments created by the rocket's breakup. While there is no immediate danger, it's possible that the fragments could eventually descend to where the space station and SpaceX's Starlink satellites are located. Slingshot Aerospace said debris from the rocket poses a significant hazard to low Earth orbit constellations below 800 kilometers in altitude.
What is being called Dog Day Afternoon is coming to amateur radio this month. The global efforts of amateur radio operators are calling attention to the urgent needs of abandoned, abused, neglected, and homeless dogs by operating special event stations in Europe and the U.S. to mark International Dog Day. This year will be the largest such activation among hams, as Hans YL3JD, who originated the special event, will be on the air as YL1DOG for all of August and September. Chris G5VZ and David G4YVM will be on the air as GB0DOG and GB4DOG, respectively. Listen for Chris on the air until the 26th of August and David till the 27th of August. In the U.S., a team coordinated by Karen KD2GUT will be calling QRZ with the special event call sign K2D from the 21st to the 26th of August. International Dog Day is August 26th. The hams are hoping to spotlight the need for rescue, assistance, adoption, and donations around the world. National Dog Day is celebrated on August 26th each year, but other dog days include National Walking the Dog Day on February 22nd, National Hug Your Hound Day on September 11th, and National Puppy Day on March 23rd. Oh, meanwhile, Cat Day will begin with special event operations on August 8th. Listen for YL1CAT, GB4CAT, and GB9CAT. For more information, visit the website dogdayradio.org.
Proud to be among the very first podcasts on the Internet, you are listening to the weekly amateur radio news and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. In the mid-1980s, there was this thing called a bulletin board system, or BBS. You would connect your computer to a gadget called an acoustic coupler that you would sit next to a telephone. You'd pick up the handset, dial a phone number, and wait until there was a squeal in your ear. Then you'd push the handset into the rubber cups on the coupler and watch as your computer started putting characters on your screen. Now, truth be told, my first foray was the next generation of this, an actual modem, where you didn't actually have to touch the telephone. Instead, the device could dial on your behalf, using so-called AT commands. And if we're being totally honest, I never actually connected to a BBS. My adventures with global communications started with Usenet News in 1990. But I'm here to make a point. I promise. Amateur radio is a hobby that is for experimentation. One such experiment is a thing called packet radio. Before you roll your eyes about ancient technology, this gets very cool very fast. At its most basic, packet radio is about digital radio communication. Until not that long ago, to play, you needed a thing called a TNC, or a Terminal Node Controller. When I got my license in 2010, I was told that this was a magic box to make digital communication possible between a radio and other radios and amateurs. Right now, many people are playing with Whisper, Weak Signal Propagation Reporter, as well as FT8, both examples of things intended to get specific chunks of information exchanged between two stations. What if I want to chat, or send a file, or a picture? There are tools like JS8 Call, which is experimenting with the idea of using FT8 to chat. But what if I told you that there's a better way? Written by John Whiskey Bravo 2 Oscar Sierra Zulu, named after a canine that became extinct 9,500 years ago, Direwolf is software that implements an expensive piece of 1980s hardware, a TNC, that runs just fine on a $5 Raspberry Pi. It's been around for over a decade. The oldest date I can find is March 2013, though undated versions before that exist. It's an example of a so-called software modem, simple to get started, and it implements the essential pieces of packet radio. It's currently running connected to my radio, and I can see packets of information scrolling past. In this case, I'm tuned to the local APRS, or Automatic Packet Reporting System frequency of 145.175 MHz. It's the same information that you can see if you point your web browser at aprs.fi. While that's great, it's just the beginning. Tune to another 2 meter or 70 centimeter frequency and you can use it to connect to a BBS being run by a local amateur. Or you can tune to a HF frequency and connect to one run somewhere else. Direwolf also supports a technology called KISS, Keep It Simple Stupid. Yes, really. Developed by Brian, Whiskey Bravo 6, Romeo Quebec November, Phil, Kilo Alpha 9 Quebec, Mike, Kilo 3 Mike Charlie and others, KISS allows you to connect a modem, like Direwolf, to a computer and use technologies like TCP/IP, primary language of the Internet, across a radio link. Any radio link. Let me say that again with different words. You can use your HF radio to browse the Internet. No proprietary modes in sight. Weak signal, error correction included. All open source, all free, all ready to go. While we are singing its praises, Direwolf can also act as an iGate, an interface between radio and services like aprs.fi, a digipeater that receives and retransmits APRS data, and plenty more. It gets better. What if you wanted to use something like RTTY, PSK31, Olivia, or some other mode? You could use FL-Digi instead of Direwolf, since it too supports KISS. To be fair, there are lots of moving parts here, and I've glossed over plenty. This isn't intended to discuss precisely how to do this, rather that it's possible at all, and has been for quite some time. I can't wait to attempt to browse the Internet using my radio, for nothing other than the thrill of attempting it. I wonder if I can do this with Morse code as the underlying protocol. Only one way to find out. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
NASA announced a new round of opportunities for CubeSat developers to build spacecraft that will fly on upcoming launches through the agency's CSLI, or CubeSat Launch Initiative. CubeSats are a class of small spacecraft called nanosatellites. The initiative provides space access to U.S. educational institutions, certain nonprofit organizations, and informal educational institutions such as museums and science centers, as well as NASA centers focused on workforce development, including the agency's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California. It also encourages participation by minority-serving institutions. Working with CubeSats is a way to get students interested in launching a career in the space program, said Jeannie Hall, CSLI program executive. NASA reviews applications for CubeSat missions every year, selects projects with an educational component that can benefit the agency in better understanding. Applications and applicants must be submitted by 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, November 11. NASA experts will make selections by March 14th for flight opportunities in 2026 through 2029. Although selection doesn't guarantee a launch opportunity, applicants are responsible for funding the development of these small satellites. Selected CubeSats get assigned a launch and deployment directly from a rocket or to low Earth orbit from International Space Station. Once accepted, NASA mission managers act as advisors to the CubeSat team, ensuring technical, safety, and regulatory requirements are satisfied before the launch. Those selected will strengthen their skills in hardware design and development and build knowledge in operating the CubeSat. 8 CubeSat missions are recently shared a ride onto space with Firefly's Aerospace Alpha rocket that launched on July 3rd from Vandenberg. One mission is CatSat, built by students at the University of Arizona, which is treating a deployable antenna attached to a Mylar balloon. Another CubeSat-1 was built by the University of Kansas, testing a new method of measuring cosmic rays that hit the Earth. This launch is also notable for two CSLI first milestones, the CubeSat-1 and another called MESAT-1, were the first CSLI missions from the states of Kansas and Maine. 4 CubeSats also went into the space station as cargo in a SpaceX Dragon capsule on March 21 aboard a Falcon 9 rocket. The space station in Florida as part of the agency's SpaceX 30th commercial resupply mission. Once aboard the space station, astronauts deployed the small missions into various orbits to demonstrate and mature technologies meant to improve the solar power generation, detect gamma-ray bursts, and determine crop water usage, also measuring root zone soil and snowpack moisture levels. CubeSats are a class of spacecraft aimed in the multiples of a standardized unit called a UA, 1 unit, or 1U CubeSat. It's about 10 by 10 by 11 centimeters in size, or 3.9 by 3.9 by 4.5 inches. They're small enough to fit in the palm of your hand and can be stacked together to form a slightly larger, more capable spacecraft. A 3U CubeSat is 3 times the size of a 1U, a 6U 6 times. NASA has selected CubeSat missions from 45 states, Washington, and Puerto Rico, and launched about 160 CubeSats since its inception. The CubeSat launch initiative is managed by NASA's Launch Services Program, based at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. To learn more information about CSLI, visit go.nasa.gov.
Boeing's troubled Starliner CST-100 will not be returning home from the International Space Station with astronauts Sunita Williams, KD-5 BLP, and Butch Wilmore on board. NASA instead hopes to book a return flight to Earth for them on the next Crew Dragon in February 2025. According to a NASA press release, the space agency will delay the August 18th launch of SpaceX's Crew 9 mission until September 24th and make room for the duo on its return flight in 2025. That would mean sending 2 astronauts to the ISS in September instead of 4. The 2 U.S. astronauts have been in space since the June 5th launch of the Starliner, which has suffered a series of technical issues, including 5 helium leaks. Their mission was to have lasted 8 days. A number of media outlets have reported internal strife at NASA, as officials cannot reach an agreement in the meantime on how to handle the stranded, disabled Boeing spacecraft and whether it can ultimately return to spaceflight.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. From Felix, EA4GQS, and AMSAT Spain comes this interesting story. AMSAT Spain attached the Genesis A module to the upper stage of the Ariane 6 launcher on its inaugural launch from French Guiana. The module was programmed to transmit FT8 and SSTV. As far as it is known, this is the first time FT8 was used from space. There have been several that have used FT8 through the existing satellites. Here's the interesting part. The signal was decoded by a station that belonged to Van Storch Engineering in the Netherlands. They also received an SSTV image on orbits 3 and 4. This final stage of the launcher was expected to fall into the sea. Fortunately or unfortunately, it did not and remains in orbit. Genesis A, you would think, can keep on transmitting. Yes and no. It could continue to operate if it had power. However, the module only had a battery pack, and the battery has been depleted. There's no power from the launcher, so yes, the satellite could operate if it had power, but no, it will not because there is no power. This was an excellent experiment. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for this week's propagation forecast report. Brought to us each week by our solar prognosticator Tad Cook, K7RA, in Seattle, Washington. With sunspot numbers and solar flux at times both above 300, recent daily space weather has been exciting for radio amateurs who watch the sun. We like higher activity because it correlates with a dense ionosphere, bringing with it better conditions on higher frequencies. This extreme activity also comes with greater geomagnetic disturbances, which cause higher absorption of HF signals. For example, on August 12, the solar flux was 272.4 and the sunspot number was 245. Middle latitude A index was 51 and the planetary A index was 122, very high values, indicating a G4 geomagnetic storm. 7 new sunspot groups appeared this week, 2 on August 8, 4 on August 11 and 1 on August 14. The average daily sunspot numbers rose from 222.3 to 255, while average daily solar flux increased from 255.3 to 284.9. The average daily planetary A index went from 15.7 to 28.6, and the average daily middle latitude A index, measured at a single magnetometer in Virginia, rose from 13.4 to 17.9. The solar flux outlook for the next few weeks looks promising, with values peaking at 300 in the first week of September. Looking at the predicted solar flux for the near term, from the U.S. Air Force, are 250 and 240 on August 17 and 18, 235 on August 19 and 20th, then 230, 210, 200, and 210 on August 21 through the 24th, and 220 on August 25 and 26. We will be looking for values over 300 in September. The predicted planetary A index for the near term will be 10, 30, 25 and 10 on August 17 through the 20th, followed by 5, 10, and 8 on August 21 through the 23rd, and it is projected to hold steady at 5 on August 24 to September 17. The sun is partying like it's 2001. That's the last time sunspot counts were as high as they are now. The monthly average sunspot number for July 2024 was 196.5, according to the Royal Observatory of Belgium's Solar Influences Data Analysis Center. This eclipses every month since December 2001. Solar cycle 25 wasn't expected to be this strong. When it began in December 2019, experts predicted it would be a weak cycle like its immediate predecessor solar cycle 24. If that forecast had panned out, solar cycle 25 would be one of the weakest solar cycles in a century. Instead, solar cycle 25 has shot past solar cycle 24 and may be on track to rival some of the stronger cycles of the 20th century. Already in May 2024, we have experienced a century-class geomagnetic storm with auroras sighted as far south as Australia, the South Pacific, Central America, and South Africa. The last time sunspot numbers were this high, the sun was on the verge of launching the Great Halloween Storms of 2003, which included the strongest X-ray solar flare ever recorded, an X-45, and a coronal mass ejection so powerful, it was ultimately detected by the Voyager spacecraft at the edge of the solar system.
In radio sport this week, many great contests. On August 17th and 18th, it's the SARTG WW RIDI contest, that's digital. Also on August 17th and 18th, the Russian District Award contest, CW and phone. August 17th through the 19th, the ARRL 10 GHz and up contest, CW phone and digital there. August 17th and 18th, the Keyman's Club of Japan contest, that is CW. August 17th, the Feldhell Sprint, that's digital. And August 17th through the 18th, the North American QSO Party, single sideband and phone. And remember, you can visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section and state division conventions on August 17th and 18th, the Huntsville Hamfest sponsoring the ARRL Southeastern Division Convention, that's in Huntsville, Alabama. August 22nd through the 25th, the Northeast Ham Exposition, sponsoring the ARRL New England Division Convention. That's in Marlborough, Massachusetts. On August 30th through September 1st, the Shelby Hamfest, sponsoring the ARRL North Carolina State Convention in Shelby, North Carolina. And on August 31st, the Summer Symposium, sponsoring the ARRL Santa Barbara Section Convention. That's in Carmelo, California. And don't forget to search the ARRL Hamfest and convention databases to find more events in your area. CW operators and contesters from around the world are invited to celebrate the 4th anniversary of the weekly K1USN Slow Speed Contest by participating in a new event, the K1USN SST Open, which will be held on Friday, September 13th, 2024, from 2000 to 23:59 Zulu. Moving forward, the SSO will be held annually on the second Friday in September. The goals for the new contest are work as many stations as possible during the 4 hours on multiple HF bands, exchange name and state province, score total points times CW speed multipliers, and times total state province DX multipliers. Stations may be worked once per band, and there is a 50-point bonus for working K1USN once per band. A CW speed multiplier has been added to score the calculation as an incentive to go slow. The speed multiplier is based on your fastest sending speed used during the contest. Certificates with score and claimed maximum operating speed operating on the honor system will be available to all entrants. For complete SSO information, including rules and FAQs, visit www.k1usn.com/sst.html.
The next World Radio Sport Team Championship won't be happening until 2026, but the worldwide competition has already begun for radio amateurs looking to enter this high-level event as part of the sponsored team. Instead of being selected based on the WRTC qualification program, based on results in major contests, prospective sponsored teams engage in competitive bidding in the hopes of securing a place as top bidder. Bidding begins at $20,000 and the sealed bid auction will have 2 rounds. Sponsored teams are considered an important funding source by the World Radio Team Championship organizers. Initial bids may be emailed until April 30th, 2025 to finance@wrtc2026.org. The competitive element continues when 2 winning teams get to the event venue in the east of England. Organizers say that the sponsored teams are as eligible as any other entrants to win the WRTC 2026.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
Technical wireless officers and radio operators in the police wireless department in Gujarat received some relevant lessons from amateur radio during a technology workshop held at a training headquarters in Rajkot. For 3 hours, 25 attendees inside the police training center in Rajkot had their eyes open to applications from amateur radio that could assist with communications in their law enforcement work. Led by Rajesh Vagadaya, VU2 EXP, the regional coordinator of AMSAT India, and the Amateur Radio Society of India, the lessons covered the various modes and applications useful in both ham radio and police work, and included an overview of the different types of modulation and communications protocols, as well as the importance of SWR, power measurement, and the use of an antenna analyzer. Various types of equipment were on display, from telescopic antennas and dummy loads to an RTL SDR dongle and CW paddle and keyer. There were demonstrations of digital communication, including sending text messages between 2 VHF radios and SSTV images between 2 local VHF stations. The organizers hoped that the attendees had taken away some new approaches to enhance their productivity in police work.
Welcome to Robusta 3A, a French student-built CubeSat launched in July by the European Space Agency, and Sonate 2, a German CubeSat that activated its APRS digipeater earlier this month. Sonate 2 was launched in March. Amateurs chasing Robusta have been advised to expect operating protocols and uplink frequency similar to the FalconSat 3 store and forward system. Until its formal commissioning, Robusta 3A was to transmit short telemetry burst on 436.750 MHz, the downlink coordinated by the IARU. Robusta's main mission is weather observation. It is the 7th satellite built on campus by students at the University of Montpellier and elsewhere. Meanwhile, plenty of activity has been reported on the APRS digipeater on board Sonate 2, whose mission has been to demonstrate the use of AI with autonomous payloads. The digipeater operates intermittently and in half-duplex mode using the call sign DP0SNX. Its amateur radio payload has a central role in the educational mission of the CubeSat, which is designed to serve mainly high school students. In addition to the digipeater and CW beacon, the VH transceiver is expected to provide SSTV downlinks on 145.880 MHz with images from optical sensors and the AI payload.
Responding to a competitive request for proposal by the Quarter Century Wireless Association, Alan Johnston, KU2Y, AMSAT Vice President of Educational Relations, and Frank Karnuskas, N1UW, AMSAT Vice President of Development, submitted a request for funds to support AMSAT's youth and educational programs. The request was fully consistent with the QCWA's mission statement, which reads in part, to promote interest in amateur radio communications and the advancement of the electronic art, especially among boys and girls, essential to keep amateur radio and AMSAT's ranks filled for the future growth of the hobby. In response to its proposal, the QCWA generously awarded $2,500 to AMSAT on June 4, 2024 for its youth and educational programs. Building on Dr. Alan Johnson, KU2Y's groundbreaking CubeSat simulator, the QCWA contribution will help bring actual CubeSat sims to more classrooms, enhance instructional materials, and to help bring a network of online simulators to bring the benefits of this exciting resource directly to youth, their families, and to educational resources of all types. A portion of this generous gift will also be used to further the curriculum of AMSAT's KidSat program, designed to spark youth's interest in space communications with its theme, Satellites in Space for a Better Life Here on Earth. For older youth, the BuzzSat program uses amateur radio as the laboratory for hands-on experiences with telemetry, control, and communications. In recognition of the QCWA's contribution to AMSAT programs, the QCWA was inducted into the AMSAT 2024 President's Club at the Platinum level. Upon receiving news of the award, Karnuskas remarked, "Thanks to the vision of generous benefactors such as QCWA, AMSAT is better equipped to help bring more youth into the exciting world of satellite communications and the benefits it can bring to mankind. Again, satellites in space for a better life on Earth."
AMSAT-EA's Genesis A module attached to the upper stage of the Ariane 6 launcher was put into orbit in the inaugural launch of said rocket on July 9, 2024 from French Guiana. The module was programmed to transmit FT8, which is, as far as the project managers know, the first time that this modulation has been used from space, as well as SSTV. Although its reception seemed impossible, the station located in Delft, the Netherlands, confirmed the reception and decoding of FT8, as well as the reception of SSTV in orbits 3 and 4 that the stage carried out over Europe. The station belonged to the Von Storch Engineering Company, has provided the IQ files of the recordings for analysis by AMSAT-EA. Although the stage was expected to fall into the sea, this did not happen and the Genesis A module remains in orbit with the stage. The European Space Agency was asked about the availability of power in the launcher stage and about the possibility of restarting the module, but the battery pack that powered the YP-SAT and the Genesis A module was completely depleted, so there is no real possibility of restarting it.
And to wrap us up this week, radio listeners tuning to 252 kilohertz may soon be enjoying some long-range DXing, as Arctic 252, the new broadcast station on that frequency, begins testing things out in September. The Finnish base station is hoping to serve listeners throughout the Arctic region. It is possible, too, that anyone with a long-wave radio receiver might be able to hear some of its signals in the northernmost parts of North America. According to Hackaday, the website reporting this story, the same frequency is used by an Algerian station in North Africa, and it was formerly used by an Irish station, as well as Finland's own YLE long-wave broadcaster, although both have long since gone off the air. The broadcaster says on its website, arcticradio.net, that it hopes for a clear channel allocation by the International Telecommunications Union.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and Be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copies sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard around the world on nets and great repeater systems like our newest affiliates, the K2IWR repeater on 147.180 MHz in Cortland, New York, and the K2MST repeater on 443.150 MHz serving all of Syracuse, New York. We welcome them aboard the vast This Week in Amateur Radio network of repeaters and nets around the world. If your net or repeater carries This Week in Amateur Radio, why not let us know about it, and we'll give you a free promo here on the air. All you need to do is put all the details into an email and give us the repeater call sign, frequency, area served, and the days and times that you carry This Week in Amateur Radio, and send it off in an email to w2xbs77@gmail.com. We'd be happy to hear from you. That address, once again, is w2xbs77@gmail.com. We hope to hear from you real soon. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.